This is the same drum set I used on that song.
Maybe that's why I was thinking about it.
Sounds. It's all about sounds.
Jake Reed here. I'm with one of my favorite drummers on the entire planet, Jay Bellerose.
Lovely to be here.
This drum set, which happens to be my drum set now, was Jay's drum set for many, many years, and he used this on
Lots of
dozens
things. Yeah, I'd say.
of albums.
It got around.
Yeah.
I had the courage to actually put it in the back of the car and drag it around with me.
If you're not familiar with Jay's discography or his playing or his backstory, there's lots of podcasts you've been on
Recently, yeah.
if you want to find out more about him. I thought it would be fun to do a video where we're just talking about his concept of sound and groove. I remember the first time I heard you play was at LACM up the street from here.
Yeah. Was that with Adam?
It was with Adam
And Larry.
and Larry Goldings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's how we met.
And that's where I met you for the first time. I had heard you on recordings before that. But to see you play live and realize that you're doing all the percussion sounds, all the textures that you're able to create was all happening live. At one point, this is not embarrassing at all. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I just started crying. It hit me so hard.
There's no better compliment.
It was partly the beauty of hearing it, but the other part was the mystery of like, I don't know what he's doing right now to make all of these sounds happen at the same time. My analytical brain could not figure out what was happening, but it was also the beauty of it. Just like...
It's emotional. We were speaking earlier about this, you know, when I was younger, growing up in Maine, I was really inspired by Steve Gadd, and it was at a time when there was no social media or anything, and so I started off hearing him on the radio, probably with 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, which has been top 40 radio. That was just what was on the radio, and this crazy, beautiful, creative, inventive drum orchestration. I, of course, wanted to see him do that. You know, there wasn't a lot of information. There was no YouTube. I couldn't. It was really hard to find. So when I finally went to the Maine Mall in Portland, Maine, and to Radio Shack, they had one of the first Laserdisc recorders and players, and they just so happened to be showing, which was really weird that they had this, but the Grover Washington Jr. concert with Ralph McDonald and Steve Gadd and Richard T. Probably the gang, you know,
band,
Eric Gale. And I had the same emotional reaction to see. I'm not comparing myself to Steve Gadd, but you just imagine what is going on, like how does this work, and what does the physicality of someone at the drum set, at the instrument, I think is a really important one. You know, I'm convinced that this posture with Levon Helm had a lot to do with the way that sounded. You know, I mean, there's they're feeling an intimate and kind of beautifully cramped up sort of vibe happening when his shoulder is leaning into the whole, you know, there's a certain kind of power, and to see someone play, it just, you see, if it's live or footage of Alvin Jones, or you put that together with the sound that's coming out of the instrument, it starts to make a little more sense, kind of, you know. But it's emotional. You see that part of it.
Yeah,
it's very emotional.
That's definitely how it felt the first time I saw you.
That's a great compliment, because, you know, drums are not usually. I mean, drummers have made me cry before, you know, but that doesn't happen often. It's not like seeing a singer or a violinist or a cello. Right. Cello always gets me. That's the one, you know.
Oh,
I love that instrument. There's something so beautiful about that sound. I think in my next life, I'm going to be a cellist. I love that tone. I love that, and I like the idea of just sitting alone with my cello.
It's that tenor tessitura.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. One thing you mentioned earlier about it's all about the sound.
Well, that was the first inspiration. I didn't realize that until much later on in my life. But as a kid, I think the thing that drew me to music, it was tone and sounds and things that, I was responding to, whether it was cartoons or the Beatles or listening to the records. I knew nothing about production. I didn't know how records were made. I didn't understand gear, compressors, reverb, chambers, delays. Didn't understand any. I didn't know. It didn't exist to me. So I would listen to records and think, oh, okay, well, how do I get that sound, And when I was really young, my entire house became a drum set for me. And I would just walk around. I think drummers do that. You just start tapping on things. You see something and you go, oh, I bet you that would make an interesting sound. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's disappointing. But often there's a tone, there's a beam in my basement that had a note to it. If you tapped it the right way, there would be a nice little woodblock sound. And that stuff was all over my mom's washing machine. I always go back to the washing machine because, that's the sound. That's how I learned how to do that.
Yeah.
Just
you walked
really quickly.
You walked right into the drum hallway, and you were kind of looking around at the drums, and you hit this Taos drum, and you went.
Well, because
you were inspired. I could tell you liked it.
Yeah,
because then all of a sudden it was like, comforting. Hey, can we set that up over here? So,
it reminds me of being in my kitchen, and tapping the washing machine, like hitting it ever so gently. I probably tripped and crashed into it, and it just made this like kind of sound. And then I somehow just tapped it, and with the right touch, I realized, that's how you find that stuff. I have snare drums that were given to me years ago that if you hit it with a stick, it's the worst drum in the world. But if you hit it with your hand really quietly, and you have, we have microphones that we can make this stuff bigger. The way that translates to microphones sometimes is really fascinating because it's, holy wow, you're just doing this, but
yeah. And
also now that I know about the studio magic, the main engineer that has really developed this kind of vibe is Mike Persante, like he with T Bone Burnett, and allowing me to play like this, but then he puts his artistic spin on it, whether it's compression or whatever it is that he does. He brings this to a massive level.
It sounds larger than life.
It's not all. It starts here, but you have to want to do that because some people just want you to play with sticks, but sometimes it's the thing that's right for the song, and if you follow it through, it can be really interesting.
When you walked in today and you sat down at the same drum set that I play a lot.
Yeah. Well, we lived together for a while.
But the second you just played a few notes around the drums, I heard this enormous tone. You weren't playing loud.
Right.
But there was a lot of tone coming out of the drums, and that speaks to your touch and the sound you've developed. So,
well, that goes back to my childhood before. It was many years before I got to be able to play a real drum set, and I would just make up my instruments. I would find, but I think I got sidetracked. But I listened to these records produced, Phil Spector and all of this stuff. There's all of these sounds happening. I didn't know how any of it was done. I didn't know. I would spend hours and hours in the basement figuring out how did Stuart Copeland make the hi-hat go like chuck, 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 So I tried to learn how to do that, not knowing any better. And it was that way with reverb, trying to find my own reverb. That's why I like the washing machine, because it was metallic and it had a decay to it, a natural decay. So you hit it and it sounded like the record.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the whole deal. When I finally sat behind a set of drums, maybe in junior high school, crushing. It was so disappointing.
Right. Because it's like, it doesn't sound like the record.
So that's a big part of when I sit behind a drum set. Over the years, I've been trying to augment the drums, and you find things along the way that will make, if you're playing in a coffee house or a small room and you don't have reverb or a PA or anything, I like to try to find some things that will add some vibe or texture or a mood. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of the emotion in music. Sometimes is the production. Sometimes it can be overpowering and it can be just distracting. But if it's all working right, it's just a vibe that starts happening. That's what music should be. Emotional. It should make you feel something. And mm-hmm. I reacted as a kid to that side of things. When I would listen to music, it would make me feel, even if it was a sunny day, it might make me feel like, oh, it's raining outside. It feels like it's raining when I live. Why is that? And then there's just some kind of tone or something that's hitting your body in a way that's making you feel melancholy.
Would you want to play a little bit?
Yeah, I'll play.
Because I think it's really important. This is something I talk about in some of my other videos, is the importance of, if you're going for something like with your fingers, turn up the close mics.
Yes.
And you don't have to play very loud, but you get this enormous sound from it.
Yeah. The chamois thing, it works well with the hands because it sort of... So another thing to keep in mind too, like what I'm noticing, what I would tweak, balance is really important for all of this stuff to speak in the right way. And what I'm noticing now, I can do it, but it's a little more difficult. I would put a softer beater on this bass drum to pull it in. We don't have to do that, but because it's a different.
I can get one real quick.
No, that's okay. I mean, it requires the right. You have to sort of, but if it's softer, you can kind of lay into the sound, so the sound starts to again kind of match the rest of what's going on. There's just all of these mellow tones, and then you have.
It's a little pointy.
Yeah, it's a little, but it's harder to control. I mean, you can.
No, please let me grab one.
Well, the easy solution, though, I mean, this would even make a difference, which is what I've done in the pinch. When. that's already.
Is it just hanging over the beater?
See, it's already the same character as the rest, and this works, but it's the same kind of thing, you know, like if you were to. I've been in situations where there's not any money. They want like a drum section, kind of, you know, like a.
It needs to sound like a whole percussion ensemble.
Yeah, so you know you might play with sticks, and then you start adding some of this, you know, and turn that up, and it starts sounding. You overdub, and so it's all flammy, and it sounds wide, you know, and you put some reverb on it, and it sounds like a section, you know.
I could do that.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean, I just want to stress that this approach takes a village. You know, there are other people that I have to give credit to over time that are willing to indulge and turn this into something. Because, you know, I mean, it's crazy, like playing with your hands, you know. It's just, I never thought I would have a chance, but there, you know, I was really given the opportunity to develop more of that with T Bone and Bone Burnett and Mike Persante, and they were patient, and especially Mike Persante. You know, I mean, he was a drummer.
Yeah.
And I think he played in metal bands and stuff when he was younger, you know. So I know he likes to have drums be hit sometimes, you know, which I do occasionally. But he, especially on that first Raising Sand record, he helped create a sound with me, you know, definitely. I mean, I kind of brought this in, and they just turn this stuff up, and it just gets woolly, and you know, it's wide because of the overtones, and when you bring all of this to the forefront, it takes up a certain kind of space. It has to be right for the music, and that's the main thing that I want to stress too. Like all of this stuff throughout my life as a drummer, I love sounds. I never want it to be at the expense. I don't want it to be used because it's a cool sound. It has to have a place. And I've gathered sounds my whole life. There have been things that have fallen off the shelf that hit the floor and make a great sound. But I'm not going to go put it on a record because it's a cool sound. You know, I have to be sitting in a session one day and think, God, I wish I had a sound that would do this. Oh, wait a minute. I remember 2 years ago that thing fell off the shelf. You know what I mean? You sort of you store it all into this memory bank. It's like a sound library in your head. That's what I've done. It just has to be right. It has to be musical, whatever it is. It's just what's the right sound and what's the right support for the music always. That's what you should always keep in mind. That's what I try to keep in mind. You know, again, it's what the music needs.
Yeah.
You know, and also what kind of mood do you want it to be, and you know, there's a great vibe with dead drums.
Yeah. For
the right situation. Just like there's a great vibe for this kind of peppy, snappy, boomy drums, you know, too. Yeah. That nothing should be off the table. I don't rule anything out. For me, you should just use everything you got and everything you know how to use. It's the music. What is the song? You know, is the song better now with what I just did, or is it worse, or was it wasn't broke before? I've often listened to songs and tried to play on them and suggested that let's listen to it without drums. And all of a sudden the song comes back, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what it wants to be. But it's fun trying. It's fun figuring all that stuff out.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I care about at the end of it all, is the music speaking the way the artist wants it to speak, in the way emotionally is it hitting in the right space. You know, it's not about, I came up with this cool drum part, but it's not the right drum part for the music. You know, yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It sounds good on its own. You know, how does it sound with the music? And that's what's tricky about this stuff, is that this can take up a lot of space. You know, and if you're dealing with an upright bass, and you know, it just takes a practice in trying to figure out when it's appropriate, and again, what hits the right emotion for the music.
That made me just think of something just popped in my head when I think of drum parts that you have come up with.
Mm-hmm.
The song on Raising Sand, Gone,
The
Gone.
Everly Brothers song.
The groove you play on that is so, it's not like a standard beat that you would learn out of a book or off some other record, but there's such a cool vibe to the way you play that kind of feel.
Yeah, that's what sticks in,
to,
and this is the same drum set I used on that song.
Maybe that's why I was thinking about it.
What a coincidence.
See, the sound was just in my ear. I would say this is part of like the it's like you sound like a whole percussion section.
Yeah, I think probably on the recording I did overdubs. Sometimes it's cool to have the shaker going and all at the same time, because there's a groove that happens, a natural groove. But sonically, sometimes it's better if it's overdubbed, because you get a more controlled sound. You know, this can wreak havoc if it's mic'd. Sometimes if it's not mic'd in the right way, it will pick up, it will change the sound of the snare drum, because you start getting bottom snare.
Oh yeah.
It gets tinny. You start losing, as soon as I start losing the sound of the rest of the drum set, I'll just, unless I think it's really important, I'll just say, let's just do this after. And I think that's what I did on the Raising Sand.
Okay.
But to demonstrate the how the parts work together, you know, because this is very skeletal, you know, it's like, essentially it's you know, slow. So it's nice to have, the guitars are really driving. It's nice to have that. That is, you know, is super just moving, and the bass and everything. So it's easy to sit on top of that, and you know, it's a very simple beat. And naturally, what started happening is it's the lifting the hand up, Charlie Watts, Levon Helm, Freddie Below trick, you know, like. You're just
moving some levels down since we were playing real
much different.
soft.
Yeah. You good? You want to check them out?
Maybe just play for just a yeah, just about there.
There's a lot of push and pull, straight and swing in the groove, you know, with the way everybody was playing.
Right.
So I'm kind of dancing around that. It's subtle. I mean, because when you hear the track, it just sounds like, you know. sound to open up just ever so slightly.
And you also have the snares a lot looser.
Looser to have that, so it has that decay. It fills in the gap of that.
And it also sounds like... I should sometimes be on camera for this, so it's not just like a guy off.
Yeah.
It also sounds like you're not really hitting everything in unison on purpose. Like you're kind of flamming some of the notes on purpose.
That's right.
It kind of makes it like a little wider.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like the trampoline effect. If you were to hit the tom at the same exact time,
it
would sort of like cancel itself.
Yeah, exactly. The bridge, that's when I think for the most part it's it's all doubles to get technical, you know.
Yeah. Also, just your touch is super light still. I mean, I turned down the pre's a hair because you're playing with sticks.
Yeah.
But it's not like you're hitting super.
Because it's. Sound, you know, that's on the record.
Yeah, would you say that that's similar to the volume you were playing at?
Oh, totally.
Maybe? Yeah.
And when I play live on giant stages, that's the volume I'm playing at.
Is what you're playing at right now?
Yeah. It doesn't sound right. It just doesn't sound right if I were to play it louder.
It kind of loses its.
It loses. It just gets. Yeah. It just dances. Point is the dance of all of these these I play off of those rings, you know, the sound to be able to what I love about groove are the inconsistencies.
Yeah.
You know, in the 80s, it was about being as consistent. All the snare drum beats were all the same, you know?
I remember you telling me one time, you were like, we know what perfect sounds like.
Yeah.
We can
That's a T Bone quote. I mean, I heard him say that. So perfect is, we know what that sounds like. It's easy to do.
Yeah, like we can do that. That's not a problem. Yeah. But it's all these inconsistencies and like the lilt, the swing, and the groove that makes it.
It's all the connective tissue between the notes and stuff that wasn't in fashion in the 80s. They were trying to strip that all away. And when I first started recording, I was in situations where that was they were trying to make me sound perfect, which is
that's something
not an easy thing to do.
I'm kind of thankful for that. In this day and age, is people don't want perfect anymore.
Some of the early stuff I did, I just remember listening to 25 takes of a drum, you know, of a drum performance, a song, trying to find 2 bars for a drum loop.
Right.
And listen to 2 bars. Okay, there's a little like buzz on the snare drum, or you know, just I can hear you breathing. I mean, it got.
I hear your foot tapping.
Yeah,
or whatever.
You're still alive. That's not good. It got to this point where, and I didn't know any better because it was one of my first sessions, you know. And I walked away going, I don't know if I want to do this. I didn't. I guess that's how they do these things, but it's not fun. It's really, and I walked away feeling like I didn't know how to play drums. Mm-hmm. That was another moment. That was the first moment that I had like that feeling was when I first went to college and I saw these amazing drummers. I almost went home. And then I got on a recording session, and the same thing happened where I walked away going, okay, this is the reality of what this is how you do this.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't imagine that. I didn't, like I said, when I was a kid, I knew nothing about the studio. I didn't know how they did all that stuff. And
Right.
click tracks were. So that was the beginning of the education, and also learning what's for me, what's not for me. If I choose the other way, am I going to stand a chance? You know, I was told at that time I wouldn't, unless I knew how to do all of that stuff, play super perfect with the click, and play exact and perfect drum sound, and I liked stuff that was just more mysterious, and like the records I was listening to, you know, because that stuff wasn't perfect. That stuff wasn't super dialed in, you know. And even the stuff now, maybe in the late 70s or in the 80s, that at the time seemed really produced. Like Devo. You listen to Devo, and it's really organic sounding, and it's great.
Yeah.
It's really... but that was the sound of the future, and the way they were presenting themselves, they seemed like robots, and they seemed like mechanical music. But it was really organic, and a lot of that stuff was more organic. It's more organic when I hear it now than at the time.
Yeah.
You know.
I'd like to move more into like talking about groove. And you were talking about like there's this little built-in swing in the groove you just demonstrated for us. I think that's something you're such a master at, is playing in the cracks, like where it's not quite straight and it's not quite swung.
It's really difficult.
I know it's
I don't consider myself to be a master. Let me just clear that.
Well, I think you are.
Because that's a hard...
It would be awesome if maybe you could demonstrate some of that, because I think you're just so great at playing those types of grooves. I remember one time when we did that duo thing with Bruce, and it became a trio.
Oh yeah.
With Bruce Foreman. And
Yeah.
you called it your crab walk or something.
Oh yeah. Well, I always imagine. I think they do this, and maybe I just made it up. But you know, there's little black. I guess their eyes or whatever the hell's going on there, right? They're just there. And then there's, you know, this straight ahead, but they're moving this way. They're going sideways, you know. But there's a straight focus. That's how I kind of see or hear or feel that stuff. Alvin, Shine, Robinson, Something You've Got is...
It's awesome.
It is
such a...
frightening.
Listening to it, you would think, this is the most simple, dirt simple beat. There's nothing to it. But the feeling of it is what gets so heavy. It's
what's
super
happening
deep. Yeah.
is that the drummer's threading the needle. So there's all of this boomeranging, bungee jumping shit going off, sideways stuff from the center, you know. So the drummer, but in order to make all of that work, you sort of have to give a little bit, you know. This is going to make absolutely no sense because there's no context. But essentially what the guy's doing is... But there's a... You know, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, everyone's pulling.
Yeah,
everyone else in the
but
band
he's
is
just
pulling
like,
on them.
And then to demonstrate it, when play some of this, because I think he's just playing a real... Those are the counterpoint things that are...
Yeah.
Again, thank you for thinking I know what I'm doing with this stuff, but it haunts me, this kind of thing, you know. And I'm trying to figure it out too, and I know there are people out there that really know how to do this shit. But I'm inspired by it, and I like, you know, Jim Keltner. He's from Oklahoma. There's something about the groove that comes out of that place, and he just naturally has that. you can play a straight beat like that, and there's so much swing and emotion and motion. And I grew up in Maine. There's not, there's not a whole lot of swinging going on there,
Yeah, I always think
I don't know what.
it's a later, I would say, mid-career Keltner example of Little Village.
Oh yeah.
The Action.
Oh yeah.
You know that song?
Yeah, but that's great. And also on the John Hyatt, which
Oh,
inspired.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
That got the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Well, that was an inspiration. That record, I think, in my subconscious, mixed up with a bunch of other elements, some early influences that my brother Nelson Bellerose, he was a drummer, and he supported me, and he could tell I was into drumming, so he pushed me along, and he would play like Sandy Nelson records. He was a West Coast drummer. I don't know if you've heard those. They're big drum surf records.
Oh yeah.
Lots of reverb, lots of open tom-toms and beats. Really cool surf beats.
Wipeout adjacent.
Yeah, yeah. But he would. It all inspired by the Krupa thing, but West Coast version, So that's where that beat came from.
Oh.
A lot of that, surf guitar would come in, and so that inspired the Gone 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 approach, along with it's an impossibly beautiful performance, which is Memphis in the Meantime. I don't know if you've ever heard that. It's on the John.
That's
Hyatt.
on the John Hyatt. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's and I read an interview years ago, or maybe he told me that. He goes, "It's just tequila." That song. Dun, 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 dun. He goes, "It's tequila." I'm like, well, it's kind of.
Sort of, but not
it's a
really.
little, tequila with a tuxedo on, So that's kind of mixed up in there too. But yeah, he's a master at that stuff. And Levon Helm, he was just naturally not trying to do that. That was the feel.
Well,
I think it's just part of where certain parts of the country just you have that. That's what's, and I'm just learning and trying to do it. I don't think it's natural.
I've got to say, I think you got it.
Well,
because
I appreciate
I've heard
that,
you do it a lot, and I think something you're also just one of the most amazing musicians and drummers at doing this is playing slow tempos.
Oh, yeah, I love playing slow. I've never been good at playing fast. I feel like every time I try to play fast, it ends up slow.
That's like Von Olin used to tell me. He's like, I only got 3 tempos, baby.
I'm glad to hear that he said that, because I think there's more time in between the notes. I like the space between the notes. Like when things start getting, you could. Okay, this is going to open up a can of worms. Why I like playing slow is because I had this realization not too long ago, because someone came up to me after a show and said, "Man, you sound slowed down when you play." And sometimes some of the recordings I use detuned snares and all that. And I spent my childhood. I had this record player that had a cassette deck built into it with a receiver. It was like one unit. And when I got obsessed with Steve Gadd, I would listen to all those drum solos. I didn't have very speed of capabilities, but I would just finger turn these. I had stockpiles of cassettes, like a stockpile, hundreds of just my favorite drum solos. Me sitting there going. I spent a lot of time listening to drums that way. And I think that's what happened to me. I didn't realize that it was happening, but I really grew fond of slowed down drums. So playing slower tempos, I'm always hyper aware of how great the connective tissue is, because you really hear the connective tissue when you slow a track down.
Yeah.
Slow down drums is the best thing on this earth for me. I saw a documentary years ago about how they were figuring out how elephants were communicating. And it was so subsonic. They would just look at a bunch of elephants and it was like nothing was going on. But they were communicating at such a subsonic level that they sped the tape up to be able to hear. When they did that, they realized they could hear content. Like, they just couldn't hear. It was so sub. And apparently they can communicate for, I'm pretty sure they said up to like 100 miles away.
Yeah,
because low frequencies,
those waves are just so long.
Yeah, there's some kind of deep communication that elephants have, and so I'm in there with the elephants and I love that boiler room kind of sound from slowed down drums. So anyway, I'm sorry to get off on this tangent, but if I really wanted to go into that zone, I would detune the drums or detune the snare.
Would you rather play this drum set for it? It's tuned a little lower, and
let me see what happens over there. Yeah, I just love that sound. Which again, that was a big part of finding my way and meeting the right people that like that sound too, because a lot of people don't like that sound. Listening to all that slow down stuff, there's a cool thing that happens. There's a song on the first Raising Sand record, I think it's called Polly.
Oh, yeah.
It's super slow.
Yeah.
It's probably the slowest I've ever played in my life.
I remember hearing that too and just thinking, how on earth is this tempo happening right now? Because and I would try to like kind of play along with it, and I would never be as far back as.
Again, I had a lot of help from Dennis Crouch, the bass player. We were both playing the track with everybody in our headphone. Everybody was playing. Like there's 4 or 5 other people might have been playing along, and guitar players, and some people were strumming through it, trying to make it go faster, And I don't know. My recollection is that we wanted it to just be dangerous and sit in a slower tempo.
It's so cool.
The way I had my headphones mixed, because I always like having I don't like to turn people off. If whoever's in the room, I like to listen to what they're doing. I want to be part, us to be making music together. So I had everybody in my headphone mix, and Dennis and I finished the take, and we looked at each other just almost with tears coming out of our eyes. Whoa, that was. What are people listening to, or what was that? And then T Bone burst through the door and said, "Oh, that's the take. That sounds amazing. You should come in." And that's the first time I realized when the band's on the floor, and maybe with everything in, it's not the right vibe. Something's not working. Mm-hmm. So he finds what is working, if anything is working. And he whittled it down to me and Dennis and a couple other elements, took out the subdivision, which is a concept that he often uses. He calls it the spine. Like, we play to this thing, and maybe that was important that we played to it, and then he took it out, and all of a sudden we're just hanging,
But when you were playing, did you hear the subdivision happening even though you weren't playing it?
Yes. And there was some acoustic guitars, in that tempo, like. So this is essentially how I played it. Like, I don't think I used a stick. I just. And sometimes, if you listen, you can hear a little subdivision, because that's how I was keeping myself on the rails, But there was stuff happening at that tempo that was like, John, way ahead of the beat, almost a beat ahead of everybody else. And that's why it was so painful in a way, like trying to hold on to the center without dragging everybody under, But anyway, it just became this thing. And it's, again, playing with the right people. If you have chemistry and the same heartbeat, like you feeling time together the same relative way is important. Because I've worked with people where we don't share that, and it's just a battle, And I try to go to the other side and try to be a diplomat about it, and it's tough, man.
Right.
But then there are these situations you sit with some people, you sit down and it's easy. It's just like, wow, music just happened.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, you're just breathing the same way or listening, and
Mm-hmm.
but so anyway, that's that thing. So that's a very, very slow down. But the other thing that we were just talking about is kind of a variation, just like that the Alvin Shine Robinson song, but all of the elements in. If I'm just playing alone, I'm kind of doing the counterpoint, the keys, and the whatever's boomeranging off of that center. This is another thing too. Getting into, I'm a left-handed player.
Mm-hmm.
I'm left-handed person. Put in a right-handed drum set.
Like Ringo.
When I found out about Ringo, when I found that out about him, I felt so much better about my life. And it explained everything about how we came up with all that cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when you're in school, sometimes you got teachers it's not right to do that. So they're trying to set you right, technique-wise. And so you're at a right-handed drum set, so I became ambidextrous because I had to learn to lead with my right hand more, and so I can. But there's a different feel if I play that same groove this way. It's not the same kind of swing. When I have to play that kind of stuff, I go this way because I feel like it's greasier, it's sloppier, weird. I have a weird control over the uncontrollable with this left hand. I'm not sure if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I think along the way, when I realized there's no right and there's no wrong, it's all creativity. It's all, what's wrong with this? This is actually helpful, and also just the concept too of that feel of straight and swing, and might be like, well, that's supposed to be. Why does it sound?
So when you were younger and you were figuring this out, is it something that you sat down and consciously thought, like, it's not straight and it's not triplety? How did you figure out that feeling? Is it just from listening?
It didn't make any sense to me until I started playing with people. And then I realized it's a collective feel. it's a push and pull from the whole band, you know, and there's a hyper version of that that's happening now, and it's stuff that happened as a result of, I think, the great hip hop producer Dylan.
Yeah.
And that very groundbreaking D'Angelo record, where they were really pushing and pulling, and that's a hyper example of that stuff. But there's got to be a straight man somewhere, you know. There's got to, or that stuff just collapses. It's easier when you play with people, and if you're playing, you start playing like that, helping that straighter beat, and someone's going,
yeah.
You know, like working and playing on some recordings with Dr. John. I mean, you can just go like, and he starts playing, and it's the coolest shit. It's just swinging like crazy. He starts, and the same with Alan Toussaint. You know, they start playing that feel, and you don't have to do a whole lot, but it's fun. When it's a machine. It's like this big churning, and you get all of the wheels, everything, all of the things spinning in the right way. It's really rewarding, and it's like I said, it's easier to do. It has to be in context. There has to be there's a keyboard vibe happening, and like sometimes the guitar's playing a little straighter, and then something is swinging against it, and
it's the soup.
It's finding out, it's figuring out what needs to do what for that to happen, and it's not like everybody doing the same thing, or it's just the elements need to be in the right place, and when you feel someone doing that pull, you know where your place is. Like, oh, but maybe a little swing to just pull it all together, just the slightest amount. But I'm more interested in the collective. I like when things are, that's why I also love the best examples of reggae music, the classic.
I was just gonna, my mind was going there.
Because that's the same kind of feel, there's a groove, man. There's a heavy groove in it. And also, I feel like I learned so much about arranging from listening. There was one record my brother-in-law had in his collection. I think I was in junior high school, and it was a Bob Marley record that he made towards the end of his life. It was maybe it was early. It was probably 80. I think he died in 81 or 82, maybe. It was right before he passed away. It's called Rastamon Vibration, and there's a little signal of things to come in terms of the synth. There's some 80s synth stuff that's starting to happen, but it's still super cool because the rhythm section is the Barrett brothers, Carly Barrett and Family Man Barrett. Family Man Barrett, I think, is one of the most underrated bass players ever. So anyway, the arrangements of what they were doing, I started noticing. And it's something that happens in hip-hop music. They stack sounds. So if you have like a snare drum sound that's, it's got like 5 or 6 different snares in it, or other sounds, and you pull a couple of those out, the sound starts changing, And those guys were doing it in real time, especially that's the skank, that thing where they have 2 keyboard players or maybe more keyboard players with a really specific feel. That just goes horribly wrong with people who don't know what they're doing. Right. I don't know anything. To hear the masters play that stuff, and the guitar players, there's a resonance to that backbeat because of the orchestration, and a couple drop out, and it becomes a different tone and different mood, and the subtleties of all that stuff, along with the way Family Man was playing bass, it was so profound. And I didn't know, when I was that young listening to it, I was feeling something from it. I didn't know what was happening. And then later on, I started to pay attention to the sonics of it and to the parts. And that's why I keep using the word collective. That is an incredible collective. Yeah. Everybody is doing their thing. The James Brown stuff. There's a great discipline and importance. You need to be doing that because the thing's going to fall apart if that isn't there. Because a lot of players are like, it's just that. Once you start thinking it's just that, you're screwed. It's going to suck. It's going to sound boring. You have to. Those guys are fully committed. You
got to own it.
Like, you know what? I'm going to play this like I'm going to die afterwards. This is it. This is what I have to say. And when that confidence and that attitude and that commitment is behind the music, that's why it sounds so good. It's when someone starts checking out, it's over with. Forget about it. It's not going to happen. I mean, if you can't be satisfied doing that, if that's what you need to do to make the song happen, through the whole song, and you start thinking about, eating a sandwich or laundry, or,
right? Yeah.
It's just automatically. So that's close, Mike. Like
that, yeah.
That sounds like it has an effect on it.
Right.
See, I've never played this drum. It's just like drums just start doing. You find that like that. I think that's cool.
It's a cool sound.
And you can have a normal drum groove that you do that's simple, and then you overdub that.
Yeah.
To add that character, that's like the hip hop stacking sound.
Right. That's super cool.
If you
So you're pushing down on the head. It sounds like it could be a sample or something. I gotta get a nail.
Yeah, in putting drums on floor tones, you get the tone, the resonator. For me, it's just like whatever you need to do to find the music in it. So. Sounds like those Boulton fun machines. See, this is putting those tones together.
That's so cool.
I mean, sometimes, depending on the mic, it's just making sure it's not too ratty, but it also depends on the drum. Sometimes this stuff could be just like sounds electronic to me, That real small
almost sounds like a little 808.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like like that bass drum with this snare drum. So hey, let's move that over there.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if any of this will read this way, but.
Let me do that. So I'll put the mic back over here.
Sometimes I'll do just initially everything at the same time to get an overall idea of an arrangement and sounds working together. And then I'll go in and I might do a different foundational track, and I'll stack this on top of a normal or semi-normal, say, you know, what I just played could go on top as a double, just like there's two drummers or something playing together.
Yeah.
And one person's playing what I just did, and then another person could be playing, you know, yeah. And then you have that like electronic metallic-y, and then that low.
Right.
Getting into this kind of thing, getting into, you know, as you were mentioning, this happens a lot when I play. Sometimes when I play live on a bigger stage, I'll be up here, where it's closer to that overhead. But it's easier down here. To like, oh wow, this is a good vibe. Like those two sounds.
Yeah.
The backbeat, that's a cool backbeat.
That's so cool.
You know, and then. I also was really compelled by when I started to pay attention to Levon Helm, and I realized 9 times out of 10 when he does a drum fill, it's with one hand. He does stuff, you know, it's it's never, you never see him do that very often. You know, like he'll just. And there's some, you know, just the natural. It's one hand, you know. It's there are limitations.
The struggle.
There's a struggle, and I love.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the struggle.
Yeah.
So there's a struggle here. There's a struggle, you know, trying to play tambourine at the same time. There's something that happens for sure. Not supposed to be, but we'll, you know. Great. Anyway.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And this is, let's see what, that's a good sound too.
What's the conversation like when, like, you just pulled it? I mean, obviously people are hiring you because this is what you do, but was there ever a point where it was like, hey, what's going on here? Like, why are you doing, like, in a studio?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think, you know, a lot of people listen with their eyes. And once they get behind the curtain at the magic show, they start getting worried, you know, and they start seeing, oh, okay. But if they just listen to what's happening, because ultimately I'm trying to make a good sound. I don't want to just do this shit because it's
right.
It's not
like you're just messing around.
So if I know I'm on the same page with the engineer and things are grooving and we're getting some cool stuff or something, I just happen to put that on the tom while I'm doing this, and then it's there. So, oh, that's cool. And if it's, you know, like I said, if it supports the music in the right way, whatever's going to bring out the character, you know. That wants to be hit, for it to speak, wants to be hit a little louder, so it. So this is a good machine-like vibe, you know. If I stay here, you know, and great songs don't need a whole lot. So the really great songs, they don't need, the chorus doesn't need to be announced. Great writing is great writing, and sometimes you can just get away with, and then chorus happens, and you know, if you need some help, I mean, I think more this way when I play live, like how it's all choreography, you know, how can I make a drum arrangement live without overdubs, you know, and you just think about it a lot, you know, like what.
Is there ever a time when you come up with something really amazing like that, and then they just go, yeah, can you just like,
yeah.
Do you get that note like, can you just dial it back? Like,
Sure.
Does that happen?
Or it's like, you know, that's not really, and most of the time I'm in agreement. Sometimes the track is obvious and it wants to be a certain thing, and you should just let it be that. Or the first thing, you know, you just sit down and you just, without any of this shit, start playing a drum groove, and that's the thing. And that's the best, that's what's making the song go, you know. But then there are moments where it's fun if you are allowed the time and you're working with people who want to explore too. Like, yeah, that works really great, but are we convinced that that's the only way? Like, maybe we can, and sometimes it's a combination. It's like, well, why don't you overdub that thing that you were doing earlier on top of what you just did, and maybe bring that in the choruses, or, you know, there's a compromise, there's a back and forth, you know. I think what I've neglected to say through all of this is I'm a source guy. I really believe in the source.
I'm the same way. Maybe I
feel
learned
like-
that from you.
I feel like what you give people has to be really good, you know, and I'm not a fix it in the mix person. I don't believe in that. I know it can be done and it has been done and people do it. But I feel like if you provide a good, interesting approach and sound,
Yeah.
the half the work or more than half the work is done. And I think, and also, from the very beginning of my recording life, I've always believed in making the sound you want to make, which requires different drums. Like I don't lean on the microphones and different compressors and different things. That's something that's after the fact for me that engineers can do and whatever. But the sound that I want to hear in the moment, I want to make, and that's why I have a lot of different drums, and that's why like all of this stuff conjures up a vibe,
Right.
You know, and like I said earlier too, it's storing it all,
Yeah.
and knowing when it's appropriate to use it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like just be on a session one day and go, oh man, I wish I had this like low. Oh wait a minute, okay, I know what that, and you drag it out and then, you know, or some cool thing you came up with that doesn't seem like it could be applied to anything or doesn't seem like it has a home yet.
Right.
And then all of a sudden someone writes something really open and then it just fits like a glove, you know?
Yeah.
But it's remembering. It's all stockpiling, like the mental music library.
I love that.
But the source thing is huge for me. Yeah, because there are times where it's like, this is the sound that you need, you know? I love finding where you can push the sound, you know, like this sounds beautiful, but you know,
Yeah.
once in a while. Sorry, I don't mean to blow
That's
the
okay.
mics up.
It's okay.
But that dynamic range, you know.
Yeah.
In the garage, I was laying into some of the toms, you know, and
Yeah.
they're just. I could take it.
Should we play a little
Yeah.
something?
Why don't you lead
Make
the
music
way?
together
Yeah.
instead of you
Communication, yeah,
You talk-
exactly.
you talking and playing. I'm sure you.
And that's
get, like,
another thing I want to say too. You know, when drummers get together and play, sometimes it's awkward. You know, it can be, and I know there's sometimes. I don't know. For me, it's never any different than if I'm playing with a singer-songwriter, or you know, it's like music needs to happen. I mean, why do it if it's gonna be uncomfortable, or you know, there's always something that can happen if people are listening and you're a musical drummer, you know, if we have two drums, and then the joke is they're not musical instruments, you know. Exactly. But we just do what we can, you know. I mean, there's a lot of communication that can happen with two drummers, and but there's a lot we can do with this. With that said, with all that pressure,
Take it away, Jay.
after you, sir.
No, I insist.
not to interrupt the vibe. So, in doing that, that was problematic for me because that's not the right sound for me.
Ah.
It was hard to control, like the bass drum. Like it was just.
It was sticking
So
out to you.
I'm gonna try this and see what happens.
Okay.
But I feel like something needs to anchor the melody or whatever you want to call this. It sits better. Easier to play. something.
So good. You want to switch?
Oh yeah.
This is fun.
That's good. That sound you're getting out of there is nice. With the other drum set. Weird, papery.
It's weird, right?
Yeah, it's cool.
That's because you detuned it, and I was like, whoa. That's working. Let me get through here. Just that. It works. We get into our own little holes together and figure it out.
Yeah. Composing. Decomposing.
That was awesome.
Let's hear some of this.
Yeah.
See what the mics are doing.
I think it's going to be good.
So a lot of the inspiration for some of this stuff is like the sound of large ensembles being recorded for, like by Alan Lomax, or there's a ethnomusicologist named Laura C. Boulton who made these records. She kind of did what Lomax was doing and would go around with this little field recorder that could only handle so much low end. And her trip is that she would go on safari with her rich friends and to Africa and record these drum ensembles, enormous drum ensembles. So they're playing, I don't know, like 25, 30 drummers and blowing the hell out of this machine. And you hear these recordings.
Just distortion.
And you go, that sounds like a Tom Waits record.
Right, yeah.
So, and the Lomax stuff too, like the prisoners, that are like banging rails and wooden ties, and just that by the time it gets recorded on a really lo-fi machine and then it gets out through the speakers to the listener, there's just something that happens sonically that, especially if there's a lot of it happening at once, like it just compresses itself. And like the Laura C. Boulton stuff was big. That's where I started, like I would overdub. I would want to hear an ensemble of, it just sounds flammy and it's like more than
Right.
So you layer about 4 overdubs of that, and then you maybe reinforce it with sticks. And again, not playing too hard. And then you turn it up. You basically record it and then you turn it up, and then you start getting that collective, like along. I try to do it without overdubbing, but. Put a bunch of those layers together, and it just sounds like those field recordings,
right?
Or reverb or whatever, and turn it up. And so I love the flamminess and the width reduced. That there's a lot. It's standing in the middle of that must have been just glorious.
Massive.
But by the time it gets through that little machine, it sounds like production. It sounds like guys are,
Just
get sound library and looking for that kind of shit. And it just gets lo-fi, so lo-fi and reduced.
All that tape compression.
Yeah, but it creates a mood. It's something that, again, it's useful in the toolbox. Like, it's this thing like, I want soft power. I want that, like, the just width instead of, flammy stuff, and then add more on top of it, and then you turn it up, and all of a sudden it sounds like 40 people playing.
Yeah.
I do a lot of this kind of thing for visual, for movies or TV shows, or
yeah. Well, I know we both worked on The Old Man.
Yeah, right.
During the pandemic,
Yeah.
and there was some stuff in there like that, maybe.
There's a track that I did for T Bone that I don't think it made it out there in the world, and that was, I did layer a bunch of stuff. Some of the stuff I did with him with Kephas Chansia for The Invisible Light.
Right.
There's a little bit of that going on. There's some layers of, and then just more,
But it just sounds completely massive.
Yeah.
Like,
and it,
recorded properly.
Mike Persante,
yeah.
Puts the pumps it up, Well, some of the Sam Phillips stuff.
Okay, yeah.
I've done some of that, a little bit of that, where it's just more tribal and more sounds like a bunch of people playing.
Jay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Jay Bellerose, everybody. Now it's dark outside. Because we've been here all afternoon.
Oh, no, it's beautiful.
Oh, is it?
Oh, it's lovely. Wow. Nice sunset.